All right, y'all. Welcome. Happy Thursday. Thanks again for joining another one of our weekly live sessions. Super excited for today's conversation. But before we dive in, just going to set some basic ground rules. I'm really excited because today the world of logistics and operations is going to collide with creative and content. And our guest speakers today, Cara and Audrey, they've known each other for a long time. So we have a little treat when we do our intros,
Mhm.
but they have seen firsthand at organizations like Summit Series, Nike, WeWork, Chief, Disney, the magic of what happens when these two arms of events synergize powerfully. So we're going to play in that sandbox today. We're hoping that it's a dose of inspiration, creativity, some grounded practicality and strategy that you all can use. But we just hope that this lights you up today. So we're so excited that you joined. And before we dive in, we are live. We're recording on demand. So the recording will be available after this session. Get active in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. We want to know what events you're working on. And throughout the conversation, any questions you have, we'll integrate, we'll pause for, we'll create space for. So we want to make sure your voices are heard. And if you raise your hand, we'll even bring folks up on stage. So if you raise your hand, you'll have the ability to speak. So we want to make this as collaborative as humanly possible. Also, we're live on LinkedIn as well. So hello to the LinkedIn sphere for those of you joining. And again, before we get started, each week we have live conversations with event content experts, all with the intention of helping our community of event marketing teams build better events. So let's do this. Welcome, Cara and Audrey. Fun
Oh,
fact, Cara and
hi
I
everyone.
know each other from a past life. She We met each other at Summit Series where I was the recipient of her great work with an event that we did at their site in Eden, Utah. But Cara and Audrey go way back. And so we're going to do a little something different. And because of the unique nature of their friendship, their relationship, they're going to introduce each other.
Yes.
Cara, I want to kick
Awesome.
us off.
Sure. Well, I have the pleasure of introducing to you my dear friend, former colleague, current co-conspirator. I'll also add in former roommate as well, Audrey Buchanan. Audrey has worked with world-renowned brands like Edelman, Summit Series, Nike, NPR, Nat Geo, and Disney, just to name a few. And she has shaped projects that range from event programming to strategic partnerships and more. Over a decade of working closely with her, a couple of years again of living together, I can tell you that she is truly brilliant. She is the heartbeat of every event and project that she touches, and she has the incredible ability to stay in tune with the cultural moment, meeting it with authenticity, insight, and her passion, heart, and soul are infused into everything that she touches. She is now the founder of The Woods Production, which is where she works with clients and is at the intersection of storytelling, whether within companies, at major events, through powerful documentaries and other mediums. She collaborates with talent to ensure that they put the message out there that they want to and that it is impactful and as true as possible.
Thank you, Cara. Wow. Thank goodness this is filmed, so now I can write my bio based on that. I'm so lucky. I could even make me emotional just how lucky I've been professionally and personally to know Cara through the years. Cara Stahl, as she's known now. Cara Bubes for the OGs that know her early in her career. But I have a few notes as well. You know, Cara got her start at BizNow Media. This is a really special company that started out of Washington, D.C., was this big national footprint that led her to work with Summit Series. Cara was who knows how old, early 20s when she came to Summit Series, very new in her career, very outsized in her talents. And so we were so lucky the foundational role that she played in the early team at Summit Series, you know, almost 15 years ago now. Once she made her mark at Summit Series, working directly alongside Perry Duchovny, our head of operations, at such a young age. It was so inspiring and so pivotal. She went on, no surprise, to work for massive companies like WeWork. So right when we were all watching the, TV series and movies later on about all of the things that WeWork had brought to the world of co-working, community collaboration. Cara had played a really big leadership role in that time across the US and beyond internationally. So young rising star, always best in class at what she does. And that led her to, no surprise, as a standout female leader, to working with Chief, this budding network for female professionals around the United States and now beyond. And so I've just been lucky to be, you know, whether I'm her co-pilot or her supporter and her cheerleader in the wings, just truly pretty much in awe of what she has accomplished at such a young age. You know, obviously she's still incredibly young, a new mom, and is building out a beautiful new company with our friend and colleague, Lana Spivak, and its Aura Experiences. So with the advent of Aura, even down to their colors and branding, I'm just so excited for them as a duo and people that I'm lucky to collaborate with. And when I think of Cara in terms of what she brings professionally, as she has since she was probably 20 years old, I won't say how old she is now, she's that A+ event logistics ninja. She's someone that I know that if I had a presidential inauguration, she's the first person that I would call. If I had to advance any kind of high level public intellectual, celebrity, nonprofit leader, she's the first call that I would make. And she's someone who, what sets her apart is that she knows how to tap into the intersection where, as you mentioned, Brian, production and logistics meet up with creative. So she's not afraid to work with creatives. She's not overwhelmed to work with creatives. She's someone who can speak the language of color and sound and feeling, and pair that up with like execution and strategy, where a lot of people don't know how to tap into that sweet spot, or a lot of people who are such high level operators say, you know, these worlds don't mix. You do your creative, I'm going to do my ops. Cara is someone who, you know, in advance of a big production will be prospecting Spotify playlists, sending great articles, finding new talent in the corners of the world that I haven't even thought to look. And she's been doing that since she was 20 years old. So Cara is a true standout in our industry. And I'm so excited for her and Lana with what they're building with Aura Experiences. So that's Cara. Oh.
You also now get a taste of what Audrey is like to work with as well. A lot of gesticulating and just so brilliant in how she's able to tie everything together.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. Through our conversation today, we're going to move through a few motions. I think we're probably going to find that we'll spend most of our time in this intersection we're talking about where creative meets operational, but we're hoping to also pull on some other threads around content strategy, speaker selection, audience engagement and personalization techniques, innovative session design, again, where that amazing content meets amazing production and the value and sort of the magic. And in our conversations before, we were joking about metrics and data, which we're not going to go into today. But instead of ROI, we were talking about ROM, which is the return on magic. So, you know, hopefully we'll open up Pandora's box a little bit today, which will be really, really fun. So those are some of the threads we're going to pull on. But I think just to get started, I'd love to hear you two play in the sandbox around, you both come from these different arms of events. What makes you two click so well together in what you've built and created? Pull back the curtain for us a little bit.
You want to go first, Cara?
I was going to ask you to, but I'm happy to. I think that what you'll often find in creative spaces is that you have people who are only creative and don't know and understand operations and logistics at all. You have people that only understand operations and logistics and can't play in the creative space and all. I think that Audrey and I both have a little bit of both of those. And where we don't have it, we have a lot of respect for the work that the other person is doing. So I think that there's a lot of complementary skills, and where Audrey is, you know, I don't want to say weaker, but like where it's not her talent that's at the forefront, it's somewhere that I can, you know, really support, and vice versa. So I think that we've always had a lot of respect for what the other person is doing, but on the flip side, we've been able to support where the other person needs a little bit more help.
Yeah, I think that's so well said. And I think we both, since childhood, because we've been blessed to meet each other's families and siblings, we are high imagination people. And so we have the power to co-imagine together how something's going to look and feel on stage. And then we can co-imagine together how that shows up in a spreadsheet and can be represented visually in a way that actually brings it to life. And so we speak, mutual languages where that imagination can express itself and come out at its highest, best use, but then in a practical way where it can be brought to life. So both speaking the language of creativity and spreadsheets is huge, but having this mutual, like, highly imaginative sensibility that we've had since childhood, we're just really lucky, I think, that we both found a profession where that is useful, where that's embraced, where that's not shoved down and silenced. And I think that's probably what has united us as professionals through the years.
Yeah. And talking about the ROM, return on magic, I think that, as an operations and logistics person at my core, I've always been inspired by someone who has an idea and how can I work with them to bring it to life? Insert crazy idea XYZ here that we've had all too many over the past almost 15 years that we've known and worked together. And while I might not have early in my career thought of those magical moments, I was always like, okay, let me tell you how we're going to make this happen in 100 days on the top of a mountain with, no running water, power, or sewer.
No big deal.
Amazing. I think in there you both sprinkled in what I perceive to be kind of embedded and threaded into your ethos. And so I'd love for you to dig into an event. At first, on face value, has an intention, an outcome, and a goal. And I know that you two hold the core belief that when creative and operations works in partnership, that something bigger is on offer, something bigger, a greater outcome than we think is possible can be achieved. I'm almost kind of wondering, like, can you dig into your ethos around that outcome and those possibilities? And in that, I'm wondering, like, can you ground us in like a real world practical example where you saw that come to life?
Mm-hmm. Oz, I'll let you take this one to start.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. To start, I would say what Cara and I have done together many times over with many different brands is that we love thinking about something at the visionary moonshot level. What's the biggest expression of how we could imagine this coming to life? Whether someone wants to do a one-day conference, a company corporate retreat, or a big festival or something. It's so fun to look at the biggest possible expression of that vision, what it might feel like, how it might sound, who we might book for something, and then to whittle that down to, if we were to explain this to a 7th grader, I always like to say, this is just personal MO, if we were to whittle that message and that feeling down to how a 7th grader would resonate with it, what would that sound and seem like and feel like? And I think in that, you tap into people's inner child, you make something easy for someone to access the magic of it. And when people don't have to do the work of interpreting the big vision, they can actually have fun, they can relax, they can sit back in their seat a little bit. And so even in how I'm explaining this, I'm sure it's making Cara giggle because I'm like full of metaphors and, using my body language and stuff. But she's the type of person who I can say, so imagine it's going to feel like if the UN came together with, an animal shelter in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. And she's not going to be overwhelmed by that. She's going to say, oh, I kind of see where you're going with this. Tell me more about that part. But then we're going to whittle that big vision down to something that even someone's inner child can be like, light bulb. Yes, I want to be a part of that. I feel that. I see how I can take advantage of this experience. So big vision whittled down to practical, accessible, open door is like what we do all the time together.
And I think that where the operations and logistics meet that is if you almost think about, I'm sure many of you that are watching are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can almost look at that as the top of the pyramid and being like self-actualization and reaching that. And so much of what I focus on to get to that point is all of the other needs being met. So from the bottom of the pyramid, food, water, warmth, rest, safety, security, community, belongingness, need, etc. And then like, oh my God, like I got to attend this event or be part of this. And then all of those things are the building blocks of being able to enjoy that experience and reach all of those different things. And so often when I am building an event, I'm thinking about making sure all of those needs are met. Do you have a hotel room to stay in? Is there security? Do you feel safe here? Can you travel here? Are you warm? You're not warm at the dinner? Great. Here are blankets that we brought in, or heaters, or whatever it might be. So much of it is for someone to be able to experience something on site and enjoy it, they have to truly have their needs met to be able to get to that point.
Agreed.
I love this thread because you're saying the same thing in two different languages, which is kind of nice, right? Like we're talking about simplicity, and like in order for someone to, I kind of like the Willy Wonka example, but like in order for someone to like, or you could use Alice in Wonderland, in order for attendee to truly go down the rabbit hole, like there are basic needs that up here at the top of the pyramid, like, right, we might not have those things in consideration. So where you two balance each other out is Cara's checking all of these boxes down here, where all the basic needs that are required to create a seamless, enjoyable, inspirational experience is actually like unlocking someone to move their way up the pyramid. So like, I love the way that that's all threaded together. I think Audrey, you said something, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit. So I'm, we're just going where this takes us, but.
And I actually had a real life example of like, actually not an event that either of us did. And I won't get into that too much, but it's an event that I attended. It was an incredible event. It was magical. It was truly awe-inspiring. And at the end of the event, they didn't have enough shuttles to get everyone back to where we needed to go. And we were standing outside in a cold desert, waiting for hours for these shuttles to come back to get us. We had no food. It was cold. Like it was dusty, like we're exhausted. And unfortunately, it put a damper on all of the magic that had happened to that point. And so whether it's in the event or after the event or before the event, like if those basic needs aren't met, you're not going to enjoy it. Like that's why food is such an important part of any event. Always making sure there's just snacks galore, because the last thing I ever want to hear at any event is I'm hungry. Like it's such a trigger to me. Like you'll have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and there will always be snacks for you. So making sure those things are met is so crucial to the importance to the event, and important to the event, because you can't enjoy it if your basic needs aren't being met.
I love that. That's a great point. Hold on one sec. Maria in the audience raised her hand. I'm not sure if it was on purpose or on accident. Sometimes people hit the raise hand option, but Maria, I'm going to give you the chance to talk if you like want to interject and join the conversation.
Maria, join us.
Oh, and I got to ask you to unmute. Logistics, seamless experience.
Sorry, that
Hey,
was
Maria.
an error. That was an error.
Oh. All good.
I would like to say, though, I'm super appreciative of the fact that these two are here, because they sound like, so far, amazing powerhouse women. Love it.
Thank you, Maria. Are you
Awesome.
fed? Are you happy? Are you safe? Everything's good.
I agree. All those things. So critical. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Maria. Okay. So that was a great lesson. And if anyone wants to join the stage at any point, this is an open forum. So hit the raise your hand button. I'll bring you up on stage. That's a great example. And I think, Audrey, you were saying something that I want to go in on, which is you were talking about the simplicity that has to be translated to the events team and the production team, but there's also a simplicity that I believe needs to be threaded into the entire content strategy, right? So then there's like the world where you're really harnessing like your magic, your power to create great speaker delivery, great session content. So can you just kind of talk about like other areas in which I would say like simplicity actually unlocks more out of an event experience?
Definitely. And Cara and I work on this a lot together when we're in process with a client or a creation. So I think one thing that comes to mind is that what I love doing, I do a lot of copywriting with people, as Cara knows, and love bringing visuals and words onto a page to help someone take what they're feeling in their chest or their tummy or their head and put it onto a piece of paper. In doing that, what's really fun is that oftentimes we want to make things feel really fancy and formal, but fancy and formal aren't necessarily accessible. What's accessible is saying something in plain language with body language and an approach that actually hits someone's nervous system. And they're like, oh yeah, I dig that. I get that. I resonate with that. So oftentimes I'll do marketing exercises or script writing exercises for MCs or program strategy exercises where we'll talk about everything in its biggest, most fancy, formal ambition, but then we'll not just dumb it down, but we'll bring it down to earth to say, but how would you tell your son about it? How would you tell your uncle, your aunt about it? And then let's use some of that language, which is the actual chosen language that represents the feeling and the function of what we're trying to do. And let's weave that in to the marketing that's going to go out, to the way that the program is going to be framed up on the website, and to how the MC or host starts to bring the event and experience to life on stage. So Cara will bring me in oftentimes to work with big executives or event founders or company owners who in general think we're just going to do a little strategizing. But then, like you, Brian, you're really good at this. I'll listen for keywords that resonate most with me, where I'm like, oh, that's what they meant. And then I'll help illuminate how those 3 keywords are zingers. They make it so easy to understand what we mean. And I know for myself, in programming work, a lot of times people are super excited. We've all heard the notion of, let's make a couple big tracks. We should have a couple tracks at the event. We should talk about healthcare. We should talk about technology. And we should talk about the future of something, right? It's always the future of some industry. And I think sometimes people are so desensitized to that it's fun to just say, do we want to just talk about an industry, or do we want to talk about a feeling or something you're perplexed by, a question you might have? What type of word actually feels like a door you want to open versus a door that you're just like, cool. It says lawyer's office. Oh, great. It says dentist's office. These are things that they don't play into the surreality of your imagination. Whereas when we look at like what plain language evokes a buzz inside of you, that's my favorite thing to kind of pull the thread through. And I love doing it, especially with scripting. So what people are going to say on stage, and Cara, I'm very lucky, will hire me oftentimes to bring some magic in there. What do you think, Cara?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I call Audrey an executive synthesizer. She can listen to someone ramble on and ramble on. She's almost like a human ChatGPT in a sense. Like you can feed it something and she's going to make it 10 times better. I don't know if I want to really dive into Audrey's brain because there's probably a lot that goes on in there, but I also imagine it's kind of like a storyboard as a creative person. And she's always thinking about the ending of the story and how you're going to get there. And she's so good at taking, I mean, there's so many different analogies that you could use for like everything she does, but whatever the starting point is and whatever the ending point is, she's so good at pulling out different nuggets, ideas, whatever it might be, and really making the whole thing resonate with an audience, with the client. There are times that I've hired Audrey and they're like, I don't know, we don't really need her, blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, well, okay, we'll hire her for 3 hours. And it's like 25 hours later, they're like, got it. Because she's so good at taking an executive or someone that is talking to a high level group of people that they think that they're doing a really good job of it, but she actually is able to help them elevate their talking points and their message to resonate even more and make them sound 10 times more professional. By the way, Audrey is a brilliant interviewer and speaker. I am very much behind the scenes. This is very much out of my comfort zone, as I discussed with Brian and Audrey before, to be in front of the stage. I was like, other than like maybe occasionally hosting a couple of things, I've never really been on this side of a Zoom webinar. So she's so good. Like every single person needs coaching. I don't care if you are the CEO of Apple or the CEO of a Fortune 50 company. Every single one of those people goes through and has coaching. So even if you're on a smaller scale and speaking at something, you need someone like Audrey that's going to help you tell your story and make your point, because you don't sound as good as you think you do.
Another thing I'll add in that is where creative and operations meet up is that I have been so lucky through the years to work with people like Cara on me expressing, here's the word we're going to use, here's the topic, here's who the talent's going to be, and having them help me understand what's the best setting for this to happen, how many seats should actually be in the room, what kind of room feels the most alive and electric. I think the best thing that many of us know, most people who are tuning in, is that most people want to say, I want the biggest stage, I want the biggest room, I want all the eyes on me. When in actuality, what might feel best for them as a person, and definitely for the audience, is that you might be in a 75-person room where you could cut the emotion and the tension with a knife. It might not be an empty 2,000-person room where volume and energy is bouncing off the walls. So I think where it meets hand in hand with ops is that you really are lucky when you can have an idea, you know the words you want to use, you know the talent that you're going to bring in, but someone can weave together the footpath of the bodies. There's a phrase that I love to use. I don't even remember where I got it, but the notion that body heat is momentum. Like knowing where the body heat should be is going to move momentum around your event. And I have studied under people like Cara and, like I said, colleagues, Perry Duchovny and others at other organizations, where they just have such a mastery of how to move energy and people through a space. So the movement of people and the grounding of like language and words that are really resonant, those things hand in hand are magic for sure.
Yeah, Cara, can you like take that further? Can you, right? Because like Audrey, clearly just a master in how to like extract the right message, the right words, the right positioning in order to evoke a feeling and experience through the content that's being experienced. You're then taking it the rest of the way and making sure that the setting is also hitting on like the right cylinders to evoke a feeling, an experience, a level of connectedness to the speaker, other people. Can you just kind of like walk us through like some of your tactics and approach? Like how do you take the feelings that Audrey is trying to evoke and embed that into like the logistical experience of the event?
Yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of my early days working at Summit with Audrey, and so much of what I had learned there is what I take into a lot of the clients that I work with now and projects that I work on now. We did away with a lot of things that were traditional corporate events and like really changed them. You know, Audrey, as she just mentioned, you know, it was like, how do you make something feel intimate? A lot of what we did in the early days of Summit was like panel sessions for people talking, you know, at each other, leaned into more, well, I guess two different styles of events. One, interview style as opposed to panels. Panels are right in some, you know, experiences, but I always loved how she brought in different types of people, not a traditional interviewer, but someone that would be coached, and how to make the fireside chat happen, how to make it feel intimate, literally in front of a fire. Like, how do you actually take them away from the big stage, put them in front of a fireplace and have them talking? We tried something of like speakers in the round and having speakers or anchor points at north, east, south, and west in a circle. So if those were your panelists, they would kind of lead the conversation, but it allowed other people to feel like they were part of the conversation as well. There were always these big gaps between the front of the stage and an audience, you know, like physically, and literally having the audience so that they're almost like looking up at the people, which is sometimes uncomfortable, but it makes you feel like you are part of the speaker and makes the speaker feel more engaged with you. Similar, like just even aisles, like always have to beat a fire code and all that good stuff, but smaller aisles, seats closer together, like breaking down the barriers and the walls to make sure that people, so much of what we have done and what I have done have been for community organizations. Communities don't happen from being far apart. They happen because you're close together. So when you think about how people are moving throughout spaces, or if they're just seated and not even moving, but how do they like interact with each other, and how do you make moments that momentum and energy builds? You know, how do you make sure that in between sessions, you're not losing momentum and energy, but it's a constant evolution throughout the entire event and experience.
And I would say that I've been permanently marred, but in the best way, where I cannot go to a family wedding anymore and see, you know, reserved seats in the front. So no one will sit up there. Everyone's sitting in the back. And then the wedding's about to start. And you're like, this poor couple has 3 empty rows in front of them. What are we doing? And or the AV starts faltering during a wedding and everyone's nervous and trying to like talk over the crackly microphone. And it's like, no, hold on. I think what I've learned from Cara is it's okay to break the third wall, fourth wall, whatever the metaphor is. You're not going to sacrifice elegance and formality when you elevate experience. So I think a lot of people, right, in the old days of event production, it would be like, everyone's in their show blacks, do not talk, we are silent, zipped up. And now it's like, you don't want to just have a speaker, a talent struggling out somewhere because a microphone's messed up, or they're, you know, have a really dry throat, they can't get their water, or something's going weird in the audience. That's something that I learned a lot early in my career from people like Cara, where you do not sacrifice elegance when you focus on like comfort. That's a myth. Focusing on comfort will elevate the experience every time. Yeah.
I do still love show blacks personally, though.
There are outfits today.
Amazing. Your lifelong curse at attending events where you see
Yes.
everything. It's amazing. Are there on either side, whether it's the content side or the production side, Cara? I think we could go both ways with this, but I'm curious, like whether it's events you've built or events that you've experienced, like what are some of the most innovative, engaging, refreshing session designs that you've ever seen? Again, that could be from a content perspective or a production perspective.
I mean, I'm a big fan I guess I look at content as any type of programming, right? Not just speakers. So anything that's hands-on, again, talking about community building, if you're doing an event for a community, it shouldn't just be talks at, it should be different creative ways of, you know, working through networking. At my time with Chief, we found this incredible woman and speaker named Marissa Franco. She focuses on how to basically build connections, platonic friendships. And so she helped us create different ways of like networking games and talking about friendship and how do you meet people. And so I think you have to be creative in that. But if you have activities from pickleball to volleyball and a dance class, whatever it might be, kind of like that saying, your vibe attracts your tribe. Like you're going to find the people that kind of resonate with you. And so I feel like engagement also isn't just, again, from speaker or from company to client. It's internal. How are they engaging as attendees in an event and creating those connections together? Someone that we worked with, and, you know, Audrey, I think probably found as a speaker, many years ago, Sean Stevenson, who was unfortunately passed a couple of years ago, in 2011 at our event Summit at Sea, he started his whole talk by telling you to hug the person next to you. And this was in the early days of Summit. So a lot of people did not know each other. And at first, people were very hesitant to hug a stranger, but it started this whole like hugs over handshakes movement at Summit. It became way more welcoming, way less corporate, way less formal. And it just kind of started this trajectory of what the culture was. And I think culture is such a big part of events.
Well said.
Yeah, very well said. And Sean is brilliant. He also spoke at one of the events that we produced probably 15 years ago or so. And he definitely unlocks a level of vulnerability. And I actually would love to like spend some time there, because I'm just, as hearing you talk, like I'm just reflecting on experiences that I've both produced and been a part of. And I want to say that like the common thread of what has actually lasted with me has been the experiences that create a space that are most comfortable for me to be vulnerable and to be the most authentic version of myself. Like I have been to like large scale events and intimate events where I've had like a incredibly vulnerable connection with complete strangers, just like you're saying with the Sean Stevenson hugging experience. And I'm just kind of curious, like, do you have advice, suggestions on how people can unlock that for their attendees to leave a lasting, memorable moment or experience at their event? How do you all approach unlocking that? Because that's kind of some of the like that feels like a layer of the magic that might be hard to grasp.
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm curious on your insight.
I want to turn it over to Audrey to answer this, but before she does, the one thing I want to say is like us talking about this is making you think of things. Events have a very high nostalgia standpoint. Like there's something that you see or hear or smell that reminds you of those moments. We were talking about yesterday when the three of us were, you know, kind of prepping for today, the container that like an event lives within. You know, you're on site for what could be 1 day or 3 days or 4 days or a weekend at a wedding or whatever it might be. And like they become your wedding friends or like your wedding table friends or, you know, the person, oh yeah, I met that person. They sat next to me at the opening session of this event. And you build these bonds and you build these connections with people and you associate, oh, I've been to that hotel. I did that event there, or I attended an event there. And there's just such a high factor that if you do, like going back to our earlier point, if you nail that experience, it's something that someone will truly remember forever because experiences are so much more valued than things now. So, but Audrey, I want to turn it to you because I think that it plays into like, that's like the end result, but like, how do you get there?
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind is just that when we get into that power of like speaker coaching and scripting, I think what's really special is that I always like to think about, and I learned a lot about this at National Geographic from a colleague there named Alex Winchell. And Alex would always say, we need to respect our audience. We need to respect them and assume that they can get stuff, that they're curious, that they're intellectual enough, that they're imaginative enough, that they can get it. And I don't know if it was that we were talking about like having to spoon feed people information or what the debate was, but I'll never forget that Alex was like, we need to have a lot of respect for the audience and assume that they are curious enough, intellectual enough, and imaginative enough to do something with this. We just need to give it to them. So respect for an audience to me is in what you're booking and how long you make stuff. I think there's a big risk in making things too long. Programming someone to talk for 60 minutes is unnecessary. People can usually say enough in 20 minutes. That 20 minutes of talking and 40 minutes of Q&A, or 20 minutes of talking and 20 minutes of Q&A, and a 5-minute early sign off so everyone can go pee. These are things back to that Maslow's hierarchy that like you really start delivering for people subconsciously when they didn't even know what you were doing for them. So respecting their imagination and intellect, respecting their time, and then packaging vulnerability where I also love to talk about like aftercare with vulnerability, which is when a speaker shares a vulnerable story that's about 4 minutes long, and then they leave you with something to think about, a question you might ask yourself, and then they leave you with 3 things that you can do, 3 things you can remember, 3 words that start with R, 3 words that start with C. That's going to stay with you. Wow, remember how Brian shared that story? Like 1, that was resonant. 2, his question just made me like, now I want to go home and think, like I need a minute. But like the 3 C's, the 3 R's, like I'm just going to take that with me. Those little packages to me are like a boxed lunch or a little sushi bento box that you can give someone where you give them the respect and autonomy of processing it how they want to and when they want to, but it's bite-sized enough that they can take it home and do that in their own way. So those are the ways that I find like you just start the momentum train because people feel like you gave them just enough and they have the autonomy to bring it to life in their own head, in their own heart, in their own time.
That's Great advice. I just left this note in the chat. I can't believe that we're already 41 minutes into this. It just like totally flies by. If you have any questions before we start to wrap up, please let us know in the chat. But I will say that Lana's here. Thanks so much for joining. And she did have a practical event planning question. And she said, I hear this a lot with planners who are tasked with programming. Do you facilitate or not facilitate keynotes? We often hear about big marquee names getting booked and accept that person can just be an incredible performer, but often they can actually fall flat. How do you remedy this, and what do you suggest, and how underestimated or overestimated are facilitators in big keynotes?
Love it. Such a good question, Lana. Love to do just some good old internet research to see how someone carries themselves on stage and how they seem most comfortable. And I think depending on the topic, that also plays a huge role. So when I think of when the whole thing is that it's special because of how they deliver something, they could literally be talking about, you know, calligraphy or underwater basket weaving, but it's how they say it that just enlivens people. It's how they use their eyes. It's what they do with their body language. It's how people start laughing. Reggie Watts is that type of person. Reggie Watts is an impeccable performer where if he wanted to be interviewed, I'd be like delighted to set him up with the coolest journalists in the world so they could wax poetic for 2 hours. But when he just wants to be Reggie, as I recently saw at an event, he literally, the way he just carries himself in a 10-minute period, you will remember the rest of your life. Reggie's going to do Reggie. I think with other people, sometimes the pressure we feel as people when we're delivering something outshines what we're saying. Whereas sitting down with an interviewer can be really special because that interviewer can say, so Cara, I want to go through 3 phases of your life. What you were like as a little kid, how you showed up in your teens and 20s, and how you're showing up now as a mom. Can we walk through those 3 chapters? And that's just like opening the person like a blooming onion to be like, they feel safe. They know where we're going in the conversation. The audience leans in like, oh, I wonder why they picked those 3 chapters. What's her story? And that's where an interviewer can help set a stage where that simplicity comes in. So I think that interviewers are fantastic for setting a stage and a simplicity that an audience can follow along, and a speaker can calmly show up because they don't have to do the work of memorizing, okay, I need to advance the slide. How am I looking? Is that booger on my nose? Whereas like some people like a Reggie Watts, like it's a once in a lifetime experience just to watch them speak, just to feel how Esther Perel hangs on a specific word. Those are the performers where like just how they show up says more than the words do.
That's great. That's great advice. And Cara, there was a question for you. You had said earlier, insert XYZ big idea here. Like what was a really challenging big idea, and what did you learn from it? And then kind of a secondary follow-up are there any event hacks that you can't live without? Just like snacks and food are essential comfort. What are the other event planning notions that, you know, you would either like cringe at and ditch today, or like what do you marvel at and adopt that you have to do every time?
Good question. Okay. XYZ idea. We often have clients that'll come to us and they have like short timelines. They're like, oh, this event is in a month, or it's in, 2 months. Can you make it happen? And I always look back on the event that I alluded to before, which was Summit Outside. When we worked at Summit Series, we had acquired Powder Mountain in 100 days. And as we acquired it, they were like, okay, in 100 days, we're going to plan an event on the top of the mountain. And we have no running water, power, sewer, there's nothing. And so we had to, get 542 tents, everything. But the one that really sticks out to me was we had partners that were supposed to source all of these twin beds for said tents, and they fell through last minute. And I think it was 3 to 4 weeks in advance. I'm calling every mattress company known to man. If only there had been Casper back then, because they could have shipped us, 500 boxes of mattresses easily, perhaps. But I ended up finding this guy. He's in my phone as Eric, the Mattress King, should anyone ever need beds still. And he was like, oh, that's really weird. And he happened to be based in Salt Lake City. And he was like, oh, we actually happen to have an oversupply of twin XL bed springs. So they custom made all of the beds for us. And that was one of the hardest things, though. It took a lot of phone calls to get there. It sounds easy now, but it was not easy. I think we had 18 semi trucks of mattresses that ended up coming up the mountain. So that was wild. And then things that I could live without and could not live without. The thing you can't live without is a good team. I think it's the most important thing is having the right people working with you and surrounding you. A lot of people are like, oh, like we don't need that support. I would always rather have one extra hand than not have the hand to help. I think that team is so important. I know that I can't necessarily fit them in my pocket, but I think that that's crucial. And I'm really not a fan of pop-up banners. I did so many back in the early days, and yes, like they're still used, and yes, I've gotten them for clients before, but I'm like, can someone come up with something better? Even when I worked at WeWork, I tried to invent my own thing, and it ended up being a total flop, but I'm glad that I tried.
Love it.
Amazing. So we had one other question come through. When you're planning an event around a polarizing topic that you know will likely spark a lot of tension, grief, what are some best practices respectively in each of your work? I actually think it could apply to both in like logistics space and content curation delivery. Like what are some best practices that allow important, hard, polarizing conversations to take place? We could also weave in like, how do you deliver content that might be polarizing but still create an inclusive environment?
Yeah. We worked on this a lot actually at Chief. Again, as a community organization, one, you have to have a safe space, whether that space is Zoom or in person. You have to set ground rules for respect and for people to treat each other with respect should they have differing opinions. And I think that this is one that you have to have the right facilitators. You have to have the right people that are part of the conversation and leading that conversation, because if you don't, it can go right, left, sideways, who knows where it can go. But I think the foundations of that are just respect and knowing that not everyone is going to agree, but making sure that you have the right people in place to support and support your audience. But it's also really important to support your team. The team that is planning heavy topics, difficult things, need to make sure that they have an outlet, because it can be very heavy on them too.
Yeah, I almost don't have much to add. I think that's so true, considering the team is huge, considering their own lived experiences and what it might make them feel or what might be triggering for them is often overlooked. And I think that in this new world that we live in, there's something about intentionally creating a space that's supposed to be productively unproductive, meaning the point of it is that we're going to be talking about a lot of viewpoints. We're going to be massaging wounds and, tender points and things that maybe we're not just going to zip up. Maybe unzipping is the point. And there's going to be other places that we're looking to build harmony and cohesion by the end of the conversation. So knowing the difference is really huge, because not everything has to just have a good ending. Some things are allowed to be like, wow, at the end of this, we really do realize we are so divergent about this topic or this set of things. But I'm one of those people that, considers themselves a highly sensitive person. So I think that it is, many event people are, but just so important to look at volume, psychological safety, body safety. And I say volume, meaning like there's even things about like how a room's energy is changing that I think any of us know in event production, like safety is such a core. And sometimes when we get in the conversation part of an event, we're like, oh, we freeze? Am I supposed to just let this go? Like, is this, the moderator's not doing anything? What do we do? And that's where kind of the school teacher inside of me comes to life, which is like, anytime something crosses a threshold where my body feels like it's a problem, other people's bodies probably feel the same way. And I'm going to take an expressive action then to do something, versus putting people through 30 minutes of something that could be really hard on their nervous system. So this is all so new, even in the last, 2 days, right? Of how we feel in a time where we know people have such different lived experiences. So we don't want to silence difference, but I think we need to respect as an industry more that the panels and debates you may have facilitated 3 years ago are not the same ones that you're going to step into now. And if you're going to approach it as you might have 5 years ago, you might put yourself, your team, or your talent in a really dangerous position. So it's almost time to like proceed slower and with caution. And anytime something's going to be heated or contentious, shrink the premise. How many people are in the room? How many ways could this potentially go off the rails? And how can we make it the most gentle, safe container is important.
And I know we're almost at time. The one thing I want to add, without getting too deep into this, in 2016, the day after the last election, because I think that this is probably so crucial, both on the content and the logistics side. The day after the last election, we were actually kicking off on an event and literally setting sail out of the country. And the election results came in the night before we were leaving. And I don't know how many sessions we needed to redo, but our incredible content team that Audrey was a part of and leading worked with our speakers to modify a lot of what was supposed to happen and change for meeting the moment. As I said in Audrey's intro, she's so good at meeting the moment and changing. And often you have to think about what happened yesterday as opposed to, oh, we planned this 3 weeks ago or 3 months ago, and what happens yesterday or what happened, is happening today, may be impacting your event that's happening tomorrow. And so it's so crucial that you are able to be flexible with those changes because it can really impact your overall event.
That's fantastic advice, right? We talked earlier about how our events are containers, but our containers exist in a broader space, a political, economic, cultural, and being sensitive and aware to those external factors that will influence our internal container. That's a great piece of advice and timely. So thank you. Y'all, we went over on time, but I hope that's okay because this was rich. And then we went deep, and in some ways I feel like we just started to scratch the surface. But Cara and Audrey, thanks so much for joining us today. I have a quick closing ask. Let's reiterate what we did at the start of the hour. And in 30 seconds or less, tell us why, Audrey to Cara, Cara to Audrey, why should folks work with you?
I'll go first. There's no one I know and trust more with the elegant experience, the professional experience, the every single detail covered experience of behind the scenes logistics and operations than Cara Stahl. You should hire Aura because Cara and Lana are preeminent female badass professionals who care about the vision of something and know how to weave the finances and the creative and the logistics into the most beautiful outcome that is sure to, deliver on your goals. So that's why I would hire them.
Thanks, Audrey. Well, if you didn't already get from the last hour why you should hire her, she's just such an invaluable partner for any project. Even though we don't work at the same company, I bring in Audrey so often because I truly do think the absolute world of her and of the work that she puts out. Her creative vision is matched only by her passion, commitment, enthusiasm of bringing and transforming every touch that elevates an event or project to a truly extraordinary level. And she can turn the smallest nugget of an idea into a monumental moment. And she really it turns dust to gold or spins like yarn to gold, whatever that analogy is. Is it Rapunzel, hair to gold? But she really does make magic happen. We've talked a lot about magic a lot, but if you want that ROM, the return on magic, Audrey's your girl, and you should hire her in the woods.
Thank you.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you both so much for sharing your care, thoughtfulness, expertise, intention with us today. I want to say that you both created an incredible container for everybody that was here today. If you both want, please let us know how folks can get in touch with you in the chat. as I wrap up. But thank you, everyone that attended today. Thanks for giving of your time and your energy and your effort to spend some time with us here today. And as always, we're here every week and excited for the container that we will create next week. My dear friends over at We Are For Good are joining us, and they are event experts, but really they are content syndication experts, and they have created experiences that have turned into long form, evergreen, ever living content across many channels and ecosystems. They actually have a podcast that's fast approaching 1 million downloads. They're an incredible team. So if you want to hear from the We Are For Good team on a masterclass and post-event content syndication, the registration's in the chat. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Again, this will be available on demand, and I'll follow up with some key takeaways in the recording as well. So have a great rest of your week. And Cara, Audrey, thanks again. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.